and welcome back to Reading with Mo. I'm going to be wrapping up all of the books that I read in the month of January and letting you guys know all of my opinions and thoughts on everything that I was able to finish. In total, there are 10 books that I'm going to be reviewing for you guys today. I feel like for the start of the year, it's pretty good. I didn't have any books I DNF'd. Unfortunately, I had no 5-star reads last month. And unfortunately, I did have one 1-star read. But on a more positive note, I was able to get to 3 books that were all part of series, and I was able to complete 1 series last month. So let's get into it. I have some 4-star books that I would like to start out with. I'm going to review these in the order of my highest rated books to my lowest ones. So we'll start off with my 4-star reads. These aren't going to be in any particular order within the star ratings. I have 6 books in total that I was able to give a 4-star rating to. So as I mentioned before, in no particular order. We'll go ahead and start off with the books that are part of it, the 2 books that are part of a series that are a duology, although I have a feeling in the future this will be at least a trilogy, and this is by the author Aaron Philip Clarke, and that is Blue Like Me and Undercolor of Law. These books both make up a duology. We are following the main character who his name is Trevor Finnegan, so I believe the series also goes by the name as like the Trevor Finnegan series. Undercolor of Law was published first in this one was back in 2021, and then Blue Like Me was the follow-up, and this was published in 2022. I really enjoyed the first one. It was really close to being a 5-star rating for me. I think originally I was reading this as part of one of my vlogs that I created in January. I think originally I actually was going to give this a 5-star rating, but I was unsure if this is something I really want to find. I really wasn't sure if this was something I would want to reread in the future, so I decided to drop it down to a 4-star rating. And then yes, the second follow-up was a solid 4-star rating for me. I read both of these books physically. I did not do any audiobooks for these. I don't believe, as far as I even know, there's any audiobooks available for either of these books. They are very fast-paced. The category that they would go into, I would say, is the mystery thriller action genre. We are following our main character, as I mentioned before, Trevor Finnegan. He's an officer and he's working for the LAPD, and he's involved in the robbery homicide division. At the beginning of the book, we were kind of getting some hints that there's kind of a backstory on how he was able to get that position so quickly. But that's something that's kind of like revealed further on as we get into the book. So the murder that we're following in the first book, Undercolor of Law, is about a young Black Academy recruit, and his body is found in the forest, and it sets off the city calling for racial justice, and he has the task of solving the murder, and it's very much a lot of pressure on him. That's all I'm going to say about the plot, because I just really don't want to give away too much information. This is a very fast-paced series that I would love to see adapted into some sort of like movie or TV series. The second book follows the same main character, but I can't really say too much because it would definitely give away big spoilers for things that happen in the first book. Over the course of the 2 books, I will say some part of it gets a little bit very action, almost kind of borderline cheesy, like action movie type stuff, but despite that, like, I still really enjoyed it and I was here for it. Overall, I'm definitely glad that I picked up this series. I was a little bit hesitant at first because I wasn't sure if it was something I would enjoy, because I believe I was sent Blue Like Me to read and review, but I didn't realize it was the second book in the series, so I really wanted to go back. I purchased the first one with my own money so that I could go into the second one, and because I believe my library didn't even have copies of these that I could check out, so I had to purchase them online, and I'm really glad that I did. I'm looking forward to the 3rd installment in the series, if that ever happens, because it's definitely left open, very wide open at the end of the second book for there to be a continuation. Next up, we have a new 2024 release, and that is The Fury by Alex Michaelides. I was sent this book by the publisher Celadon Books. You may recognize this author if you read previously The Maidens or The Silent Patient, which I haven't read either of them. I've heard a lot about them, but after reading this book, it's definitely piqued my interest, and I'm interested now in picking up those other 2 books to see if I enjoy it, because I did enjoy this one. Although I was sent a physical copy, I ended up actually checking out the audiobook for this from my library, and as an audiobook, it's something I definitely would recommend. When I first started reading this book, I wasn't sure that I was going to be something I would like, because typically in the past when I've read books where the main character breaks the fourth wall, I found that trope a little bit cheesy. But this is one of the few cases where I didn't mind, and I can't give away the ending, but I enjoyed where it went. I was very thoroughly entertained by this book. We are following our main character. His name is Elliot Chase, and he is telling the story of him and his friends who are traveling to this Greek island where one of them, who is this ex-movie star, is murdered. And that's not really a spoiler, it's very much revealed very early on in the book. And from there, we're going back and forth in the timeline to see how this came about. This is one of those books where you think you know what's going on, and then the author likes to play with your expectations. While I enjoyed this book, I can definitely understand why it may be something that other people may not enjoy as well. Especially, like I said before, if you're not into the character breaking the fourth wall. I haven't really looked at a lot of reviews and it's very new. I feel like it's a book that potentially could be very divisive. I feel like you're either gonna love this or hate this. I enjoyed it enough that it made me want to pick up other books by this author. I would describe this as a psychological thriller slash, maybe more so like a mystery even than a thriller. It's told in kind of like a play form, and the book is separated into 5 different acts. This is another book that I would really enjoy and love seeing played out on the big screen. Next up, we have a classic, and that is The Little Mermaid and Other Fairy Tales by Hans Christian Andersen. This is a classic children's fairy tale collection from the author Hans Christian Andersen. This specifically is published by Mina Lima, which these books are 5 out of 5 for the amount of attention and thought and detail that goes into these. These are very beautifully published books. Like, they have all sorts of little like pop-ups and illustrations and 3D elements that really make the reading experience more enjoyable. If I had children, I would like for sure have all of the books that they publish, and I think they're very beautiful. I have a few other ones on my shelves as well. This book I ended up reading out loud over the course of a few different nights as I was putting my own large child, aka my boyfriend, to sleep over the phone, and he likes to be read stories, and so I figured I would read him this. He's not even really paying attention. It was more so for myself, whatever I wanted to read. I don't really have too much to say about this book in particular, but I think if you like fairy tales, and reading kind of like the origins of them, it's something that you would enjoy. For me, it's like something I enjoy, but it's not something I really go out of my way to read. I believe if I didn't have these like gorgeous editions, it's probably not something I would have picked up, but I still enjoy it for what it is. I feel like the stories themselves were kind of just okay. Inside this book there are 12 short stories. Some are more interesting than others, but I didn't necessarily like love anything that I read. At least not to the point that I would reread it. I mean, if I had a child or a kid, then yeah, this is something I'd probably read to them maybe, but just rereading it for my own personal enjoyment is probably not something that's going to happen. I just really love the production value of these books. They are so beautiful, and like I said, if I had a child, then these books would definitely be in their book collection. Next up, we have a book that is the first in a series, and that is The Warden by Anthony Trollope. This is a classic series that was published in 1855, and there's 6 books in total, and I do plan on continuing this whole series. This was my first time picking up any books by the author Anthony Trollope, and this was my second time attempting to pick up this book. I believe it was like a year or 2 ago. I attempted to listen to this on audiobook because it was a fairly short audiobook, and I just really couldn't recommend it. At least personally for me, I needed to read this book physically to be able to give like my full attention to it and understand it to the best of my ability. This is a classic, and it takes place in a fictional county, and that county is called Barsetshire. And it's basically this tiny little cathedral town, and at the heart of the story we're following the semi-scandal, I guess you could say, where it's talking about pretty much just like people's values. This is definitely not a series for everyone, I can tell you right now, but I was curious about it and I want to see where it goes. I'm going to continue on with the series. These are very beautifully designed hardcover books. I am a sucker for a naked hardcover, and all of the series are beautifully designed like this. The writing itself in the book was pretty easy to understand, to follow along with, for being classic. The main thing that was it kind of took me some getting used to because I wasn't super familiar with it, was some of the like religious terms and things that they would bring up in the book. Like, it would take some getting used to, like identifying the religious hierarchy and the clergy and like all the just lay terms and things that I wasn't familiar with. If you enjoy reading classics, this is probably something you would enjoy, but if you aren't a diehard classic reader, I am not really sure you would get too much enjoyment out of this book. This book is a satire and it does focus on a lot of church politics. The gist of the main conflict of the story is there's this man who died and he left money to support 12 retired old men in Barsetshire in this like retirement nursing home situation hospital, and the warden's position is appointed by the church, and there's a lot of different conflicts of interest, especially when the warden, the land is doing so well and he's making a lot of money per year, and the people are divided on whether the warden should be receiving that money, which he has been in that position, has always received that money, or if that money should be redistributed to the men in the hospital, even though that technically wasn't what was specified in the will when the original owner of this estate set his will up for this whole charity thing to be set up. Eventually this kind of gets into the news and it causes a lot of division, and it's very awkward because it involves different families that are all part of this village, and people are divided depending on your opinion on what you think should happen. Even the warden himself is having this big moral dilemma on whether the money he has he's really entitled to or not, and whether he should keep this position or not. Pretty much the whole gist of the story is what should be done with the money legally and morally. It was a book that definitely provokes a lot of thought about its message. I definitely gave this kind of a high 3-star rating for me, but I rounded it up to a 4-star rating. Overall, it's not a new favorite, but I am definitely intrigued enough to continue on with the series. Next up, we have a book I don't own. It was a 2022 new release, and I checked out the audiobook from my library, and that is The Silence in Her Eyes by Armando Lucas Correa. This I gave a 3-star rating, so now we're on to my 3-star rated books. This book is a psychological suspense mystery thriller is the general category I would put it in. In this book, we're following a main character. Her name's Leah, and she has this very rare neurological condition that's called kinetopsis. I think I'm saying that right. I hope I might not be, but it's motion blindness. So since she was a child, there was an accident that happened that she cannot see movement. Currently, she lives in Upper Manhattan, and her neighbor, she is convinced, is going to be murdered. Because she's not fully blind, she just can't see movement. A lot of people assume because they see her with her walking stick that she is fully blind. But her senses, especially her smell and hearing, are extremely good. Almost a little too good in my opinion, where she can smell and hear people in other parts of her apartment building. So I'm not really sure how much that's true to people who have this condition. She ends up befriending this neighbor, Alice, and getting involved with her, and she thinks something bad is happening, but she can't prove it. Overall, I think the book was okay. The ending wasn't something that I would have predicted, and that's what was able to keep it more interesting to me. And that's why I'm giving it a 3-star rating, just because I feel like the ending wasn't something I predicted. It was a decent mystery with a nice surprise ending. It kept me interested long enough to finish the whole audiobook, and when I finished it, not feel like it was a complete waste of time, which is very good for mystery thrillers. So overall, a 3-star mystery. Next up, we have another mystery, but this one is a little bit older. This was published in 2008, and that is A Darker Domain by Val McDermid. This is actually the second installment in a series following the inspector. Her name is Karen. This series by this author apparently has 7 books that are out in the series, and the most recent one was published in 2023. This is a series I didn't think I would keep reading on the whole thing with, but I did enjoy it. I picked this up because I had this book in the Harper Olive perennial editions, and trying to work my way through these because they've been sitting on my shelves for far too long. These ones were released a few years ago. These specific editions were published in 2019. This book takes place in dual timelines, and we are following the detective Inspector Karen. She's working on a cold case, and there's a couple of different cases that she's working on that are both in the 80s in Scotland. This isn't a book I would have picked up had I not had it as part of this specific special editions. It was interesting enough to read, but I really don't feel compelled enough to continue on with this series. I feel satisfied with how this book ended. If you're into the like detective mystery, like really your classic mystery series detective novels, I feel like this is something that you would enjoy. I mostly stuck to listening to this book on audiobook. I was able to get this as an audiobook from my library, so I didn't really, I would kind of go back and forth a little bit with the audiobook and physical book, but definitely overall, mostly listening to this one. The main plot is the cold case that the inspector is looking into about a man who disappeared 22 years ago and a kidnapped baby boy who's been missing for over 2 decades. This is part of the series, as I mentioned before, so like this is a book you don't have to have read though. The first book, this is the second book in the series. You don't have to have read the books prior or even need to read the books after to get the fullness out of this book that you could get. It works absolutely perfectly fine as a standalone, which is why I also don't feel like the need to continue on with the rest of the series. I found our main character interesting enough of a detective, but not compelling enough that I feel like I need to read more books from her perspective. Before I continue on, I forgot actually one of my 4-star reads, and so let's wind it back to that. So we have The Virgin Suicides by Jeffrey Eugenides. This was originally published in 1993. As I mentioned, I gave this a 4-star rating. It takes place in Detroit, and we're following the story of the 5 Lisbon sisters who are somewhat kind of at a distance from everyone around them in their neighborhood and school that they live in. They're watched over by the neighborhood boys who are observing them, and they're the ones who are narrating the story, which puts us at a remove from them because we never get any point of views of the sisters themselves. And over the course of a year, one by one, all of them unfortunately die by suicide. There's a movie adaptation of this book out that I haven't gotten around to watching yet, but I do plan on watching it eventually. I read this book physically. I actually started it on a plane ride back home from Jamaica, and I was able to get like a third of the way into it. It was very easy to read through as far as the writing style, but it's not necessarily something that I feel like I'm ever gonna like pick up again or something that I would highly recommend to others, just because it is more on the heavier, darker reading material side. This book has been on my shelves for ages and I've been meaning to get to it for forever, so I'm really glad that I finally got to this book. It's definitely one of those modern classics you see around everywhere, and I just finally picked it up. While the book is kind of told in a more of a lighthearted way because it's being told from the perspective of some younger boys, it's really touching on dark topics, and the whole time I was reading it I was like hoping for a different ending, but from the title, I mean, it's no spoiler how it ends, and so yeah, it's not necessarily like a really heartwarming or uplifting book. I get what the author was doing by giving us the girls' stories from the outside observers, but I would have appreciated more of a look into the sisters' minds to kind of see exactly what they were thinking and feeling and their motivations and stuff. But I suppose that was the point of the book, is that we could only make assumptions like everyone else who knew the sisters, like the narrators who are telling the story, and we just don't know what was going on within their unit, what was going on in their thought processes. But overall, I did enjoy the writing style, and I would be open to picking up other books by this author in the future. Then we have Brazed Pork by On You. This book here was published back in 2020, and this is my second time reading a book by this author. I read Ghost Music, which was published last year in 2023, and I gave that one a 3-star rating as well. I just thought it was okay. After reflecting on this, like, a couple weeks after I've read it now and finishing this book, I feel like this was when I rounded it up. Maybe I just don't know. Looking at reflection, like, I just really don't see much of a point in this book. I didn't really get much out of it, and I didn't feel like it was very interesting or even was able to give me any sort of entertainment to purposes of reading this book. I think after reading 2 books by the same author and not really being like impressed or blown away by either of them, that I kind of feel like I probably should just not pick up any other releases by this author, unfortunately, just because I haven't loved either of them, and I've kind of come away with them feeling like kind of like maybe that was a little bit of a waste of time. We're following our main character. Her name is Jaya, and one day she walks into the bathroom and she finds her husband dead, and there's a piece of paper next to him, and it intrigues her. There's like this mysterious drawing on it of some sort of like manfish, and it's no mystery. Like, her husband was older, he died of health reasons. It's not like it's a murder, it's not that kind of book, but her being so intrigued into this book, into this drawing that she finds, it sets her off on her own journey of discovering what that means, especially as she's kind of like lost herself and feeling adrift after her husband's death. This book overall was just kind of boring and very unmemorable to me. There's a lot of parts about this book that just didn't really make sense, and I just didn't get it. So I don't know if that's just a me problem or a problem with the book. I found myself confused so many times when I was reading this book and just not really sure. I didn't see what I was supposed to take away from this book. Maybe a lower rating would be more fitting now that I kind of look back at it and think about it. But if the book hadn't been so short, I definitely would have DNF'd it. I listened to this majority of this on audiobook, and it was a very short audiobook, and I found myself just finishing it because I wanted to know what the ending was going to be, not necessarily because I enjoyed it. Finally, unfortunately, we're on to our 1-star read from January, and that book was a new release that came out last year, an audiobook I actually listened to, so at least I didn't spend any of my actual money on it. I checked it out from my library. The book I'm talking about is This Wretched Valley by Jenny Kiefer, and I feel like this is a common thread I'm saying in these books, whereas I'm picking up books that I'm not 100% sure if they're going to fall into my wheelhouse, but I'm willing to give them a chance. For me, I like to just try different books out, and you know, sometimes it's going to be a hit, sometimes it's going to be a miss. Unfortunately, this one was a big miss, and it's a 1-star rating. I did not like it. I do not recommend it. This book overall felt so stupid to me. It's a horror thriller book, which is horror books in general just aren't something I pick up a lot to begin with, and oftentimes when I do, I just find myself regretting it. But I keep trying because I'm like, I want to like horror, but there's just so much of it that I just won't even like mess with, and so much of it is just like so dumb and cheesy to me. So this book kind of fell into that kind of category. So we're following the story of 4 climbers, and they're going into the Kentucky wilderness. 7 months later, 3 mangled bodies are found, and one of them is still missing. Apparently this is inspired by the Dyatlov Pass incident. I'm not familiar with that, but maybe I should look into it and give me a little bit more context of it. One of the girls on this trip is an Instagram climber. She has her boyfriend with her and her dog. And there's another guy who's coming. His name's Clay, and he's a geology student who has discovered this untouched cliff. And we have his research assistant with him. So those are the 4 main characters. The bodies, when they are found in all these different states of decay. This is the author's debut novel, and to me, it definitely reads very much like a debut novel. I know horror is just never gonna be my favorite genre, but I like to test it out here and there, as I mentioned. I thought the whole premise of what was going on the cliff had potential to be interesting, but it just overall felt really dumb. I did not like the direction that the story went in. I just found things very unrealistic, which I guess is kind of a characteristic of the genre sometimes, but that's not totally unexpected. It was a very short audiobook, so I just finished it so I could know what the ending was going to be, but not at one point in this like survival book, horror book, did I feel at any point like scared or unsettled or anything. But yeah, I wasn't even able to enjoy it even for entertainment purposes, just because it came off overall so cheesy to me. So I would steer clear of this book unless it sounds like something that's in the category of what you love and read regularly. But yeah, for me, this was a very big skip. So after that great review, those are all 10 books that I was able to get to in the month of January. Let me know what you guys read, and if you have anything that stood out to you last month. I'm excited to see how February goes. So far, I have read a good amount of books, and I can't wait to talk about them and share them with you. And spoiler alert, one book has finally gotten, I've had my first 5-star read for the year, so I can't wait to talk to you guys about that in my February wrap up. So don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, especially so you can see right away when I post my wrap up for February. And that's it for today. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!